press the red subscribe button before you watch this video. No, you watching the video, you clicked on the video, press the red subscribe button immediately, now, for a cookie. Please, just press it, please. It will help out a lot, and I'll continue making videos. Please.
The finals are almost over, which means the off-season and all its excitement are right around the corner. The draft, free agency, and looming trades are all exciting things on the horizon, as every team will be looking to make moves to improve themselves both before next season and for the future. This brings us to the topic of today's video, which will be the first of a two-part topic where we will be going through every NBA team, identifying the one player that is most likely to be traded this summer from that team. Some teams have some big names on the move, while others will only be looking to make smaller deals, but every team has at least one guy on the trade block. Today's video will be covering the teams in the Eastern Conference, and then tomorrow's video will be going through the teams in the Western Conference, so stay tuned for that as well. Before we start though, it turns out about 61% of you right now watching aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. Going in alphabetical order, we'll be starting with the Atlanta Hawks, and the player most likely to be traded from this team is John Collins. Collins is technically a restricted free agent, so he will be testing the waters of free agency, but the Hawks have the right to match any offer he gets to retain him. The discussions between Collins and the Hawks organization have been going on for a long time now, all throughout the season, and they were never able to reach a deal on an extension, because the Hawks have shown that they are very hesitant to pay him the big money that he's looking for. If another team in free agency gives Collins a big money offer, the Hawks may use their leverage to match the offer, then pull off a sign and trade to at least get some sort of value in return for him without having to pay him. The next team up is the Boston Celtics, and the player they're most likely to trade isn't a flashy selection, but it's Grant Williams. Had I made this video earlier, the pick obviously would have been Kemba Walker, but the team has already traded him for Al Horford, so now their big moves are likely over. Bringing in Horford while still having players like Tristan Thompson and promising youngster Robert Williams means front court playing time will be scarce, and Grant Williams will probably be the odd man out. Grant has improved as a shooter and plays hard on defense, so he should have some value on the market, and the team could use him to try to make a move on the margins to address an area of need. Next up is the Brooklyn Nets, and the player they're most likely to trade this summer is DeAndre Jordan. Jordan is clearly over the hill as a player, and the team knows it, as evidenced by the fact that he was a healthy scratch sitting at the end of the bench for the entirety of the postseason this year. He's also going to be making nearly $10 million next year, which is obviously not ideal for a team already way over the salary cap to be spending on a player that isn't even in their rotation anymore. They have their three superstars hopefully getting back to full strength for next season, and they need to maximize every dollar spent, so the goal will be to move Jordan's contract away for anything that can help them make a finals run next year. Up next is the Charlotte Hornets, and the player they're most likely to trade away is Devonte Graham. Graham is another sign-and-trade candidate who is entering the offseason as a restricted free agent, but sign-and-trades are becoming more popular as of late, so it's definitely plausible. The team probably should have moved him during the season to maximize their return, but a move now is still very much in the cards. With LaMelo Ball leading the way of their future plans and Terry Rozier under a hefty longer-term contract, it wouldn't make sense for them to pay Graham to keep him with that crowded backcourt, so once again, it would be the smartest move to find a suitor willing to give them something worthwhile in return for his services instead of letting him walk for free. Up next is the Chicago Bulls, and the player they're most likely to trade is another unglamorous pick, but it's Al-Farouq Aminu. The Bulls will have some cap space to spend in free agency this year, but with Aminu going into the final year of his contract, paying him over $10 million, they could free up even more money to spend if they trade him away. Aminu has quickly been declining as a player over the last few seasons, and he's struggled to even retain a consistent spot in rotations over the last 2 years, so he makes much more sense as a trade chip for the Bulls than he does as an actual player on the roster. Next up is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the player they're most likely to trade this summer is Collin Sexton. Sexton's in such a weird situation right now because despite coming off of yet another stellar season where he showed even more improvement all around while putting up 24 points per game, he still isn't that highly regarded by the Cavaliers organization. Every report that comes out of that team seems to indicate that Sexton is not a part of their long-term future plans, so at this point it would definitely be best for both sides to move on and allow Sexton to get a fresh start elsewhere. He's already one of the best scorers in the league at just 22 years old, and there will be plenty of teams looking to acquire him, so a deal definitely wouldn't be difficult for them to come by. Next up is the Detroit Pistons, and the player they're most likely to trade this summer is Sekou Doumbouya. The Pistons right now are actually undergoing one of the most promising rebuilds in the league and have plenty of young talent to grow and develop. They also have Cade Cunningham likely coming in by the way of the #1 pick in the draft, so that core will be even stronger next season. With that said though, Doumbouya seems to be the odd man out in this young core with a crowded group of frontcourt players ahead of him, and the fact that he regressed from year 1 to year 2 this season doesn't exactly help his case either. Up next is the Indiana Pacers, and the player they're most likely to trade this summer is Domantas Sabonis. I've discussed this a few times already in prior videos, but basically this season proved that the Pacers' Twin Towers game plan of starting 2 centers is not nearly effective enough to justify using moving forward, and they will probably have to choose between either Sabonis or Miles Turner for their own sake moving forward. With both Turner and Sabonis on the court, the team's net rating plummeted, and when Miles Turner got to play center with Sabonis off the court, the team became far more effective than when Sabonis would be on with Turner off. The Pacers are a team more built around their defense, which Turner definitely boosts, and Turner also doesn't need as many offensive touches, which gives more freedom to their perimeter scorers, so even though Sabonis is their all-star and best player, he would also bring in the most value in return through a trade. Next up is the Miami Heat, and the player that they are most likely to trade this summer is Tyler Hero. The Heat have learned the hard way that they need to capitalize on big opportunities when they present themselves, so after passing on the chance to trade Hero countless times throughout last season, they very well may finally pull the trigger this summer. The Heat suffered a brutal first-round sweep in this year's postseason, proving that the current core isn't good enough moving forward, and with Hero's value still being fairly high as a promising youngster with potential, they could be able to cash in on someone more fit to get them back on track into contention in the Eastern Conference. Next up is the Milwaukee Bucks, and the player they're most likely to trade this summer is Donte DiVincenzo. Being in the finals on the verge of a championship right now means they really shouldn't be looking to trade anyone, but if they are going to make a move, DiVincenzo is clearly their most movable asset. They proved this by almost trading him last offseason for Bogdan Bogdanovic, and if a similar offer presents itself, they won't hesitate to move him in order to improve the team and continue to build a contender capable of winning more championships. Up next is the New York Knicks, and the player they're most likely to trade is Kevin Knox. Knox's time in New York is clearly over, and with him very quickly approaching the status of being a draft bust, he needs a fresh start elsewhere in order to rejuvenate his career. The Knicks obviously won't be able to get that much in return for him, but rebuilding teams willing to take a flyer on a young guy with potential should definitely have some interest in trying to get the most out of him, because despite the fact that he's played pretty poor throughout his career, he does have raw talent that can be tapped into in the right circumstance. Up next is the Orlando Magic, and the player they're most likely to trade this summer is Terrence Ross. The Magic started to sell off all of their veterans last season as they shift their focus towards a rebuild, and with Ross being the only player over the age of 30 left on the team, he's clearly the next one out the door. Ross has provided a strong spark offensively off the bench for years now, and that kind of player always draws attention by teams trying to win on the trade market. If the Magic could get some draft capital or young talent in return, they won't hesitate to pull the trigger on a trade here. Next up is the Philadelphia 76ers, and the player they're most likely to trade this summer is Ben Simmons. Ben has been the player dominating trade rumors from the moment the team got eliminated from the playoffs, and with the team trying to salvage their window of opportunity to contend for a championship, they will definitely be looking for ways to trade Ben for a player that can help them do that. They won't rush to make just any trade though, as most average fans would lead you to believe, and there is honestly a chance that he could go untraded this summer if the right deal doesn't present itself. However, if some big names become available, a package surrounding Simmons will be one of the best offers anyone can realistically put together this summer. Up next is the Toronto Raptors, and the player most likely to be traded here is Kyle Lowry. Lowry is another free agent this summer, but with how long he's been a Raptor and how much he means to the organization, he would definitely be willing to work with them on a sign and trade if he were to leave in order to get them something of value in return for his services instead of just leaving them for nothing. Lowry is one of the greatest players in Raptors history, and after how much he's done for the team, I really feel like it would be a deal that benefits everyone that gets done. And finally, the last team up is the Washington Wizards, and the player most likely to be traded from them this summer is Davis Bertans. The Wizards paid Bertans $80 million for 5 years in free agency last offseason, and then this year, after being paid, he really fell off quite hard. His shooting looks good percentage-wise at 39% from 3, but he was incredibly streaky, having gone through several long cold streaks. He struggles mightily to impact the game anywhere else on the court. He's one of the worst defensive players in the league, and the Wizards, quite frankly, aren't good enough to be able to afford to spend that much on just a shooter. With that said, shooters are always sought after by teams trying to win, so somebody would definitely be willing to take in his contract. But if the Wizards truly do want to build around Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, they can't have that much cap space tied into someone like Bertans. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below who you think will be traded this summer. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2 coming tomorrow with the teams in the Western Conference.